Welcome to this episode of The Bored Book Geek. My name is Darth James, and if you want to support this weird little corner of the internet, you're welcome to check out Ko-fi, where you can buy me a coffee, Patreon, Substack, as well as YouTube channel memberships. Also, remember, if you don't want to do that, you can always just like this video, leave a comment, and hit that hype button. Let's start the show. Mima begins the film trapped in a soft cage. She's the member of an idol group designed for consumption. Visually infanticized, vocally restrained, emotionally curated. Her life is not her own, it's a product, marketed, polished, priced. The horror begins not with violence, but with the choice. She leaves the group to become an actress. The act in itself is revolutionary. A, a rejection of the idol mold and an attempt to define herself on her own terms. But that's where it begins to spiral. Perfect Blue is the autonomy of punishment. That's a good way to describe this film. The entertainment industry devours her agency under the guise of liberation. The grape scene she films within a fictional story is both simulated and real in its psychological violence. She is told it's just part of being a serious actress. The camera captures her struggle. At first a performance, then a trauma. We, the viewer, are implicated. It's not clear when she starts disassociating. Perhaps the horror is she never stopped. It's not the loss of innocence that haunts her, it's the loss of control over her own narrative. If there's a core mythos to Perfect Blue, it's a mirror. Not just a literal mirror, but a reflected surface in the forms of screens, cameras, and most chillingly, the internet. A blog written by someone impersonating her acts as a digital doppelganger, a curated persona more real to her fans than she is. It remembers things she can't, it comments on faults she didn't have, and slowly she begins to question whether she exists at all outside of a constructed image. This is interface horror in its purest form. Not the fear that the internet is watching you, but it has already replaced you. This film was ahead of its time. Today, we all maintain our own effectively blog, curated self-identity, visual Instagram feeds, Facebook timeline, Twitter personas. We self-curate constantly. And what happens when those performances overtake the self? What happens when the projection becomes the product and the person becomes the ghost? In her case, the boundaries collapse. She is haunted by herself, by an image of purity she no longer lives up to. She sees the idol version of herself floating around the city, laughing, flirting, untainted. The ghost isn't supernatural, it's digital, it's cultural, it's performance. It's the self as simulation. And a great quote, a copy of a copy severed from the original. It's a brilliant film. The two most disturbing characters in Perfect Blue are not strangers, they are fans. The stalker who believes the real her lives in the blog, and her manager, who ultimately attempts to become her. They are mirrors of obsession, corrupted by the desire to fix her in time as a product, as a fantasy, as an idol. The stalker believes he's projecting the pure form of her from the imposter who defined herself. But he's really in love with control. He wants to conform her to his internal script. Her manager is worse, a former idol herself. She cannot bear to see her grow beyond the limits she couldn't escape. She dons the costumes, she wears the masks. She tries to protect the version of her that fans desire, not the one who really wants to evolve. This is Perfect Blue. It's become an allegory for existence under the gaze. It seemed to be split, to grow is portrayal And then you have the stalker's attempts to kill the real her in the logical endpoint of celebrity culture. Bjork, for example. It's fascinating and psychologically intense. The creator didn't just tell a story about identity collapsing. He weaponized form to make the viewer experience it. Scenes repeat with slight changes, time loops unfolds. 1 minute she's filming a scene, next minute she's dreaming, then walking, then performing again. The transitions are seamless and terrifying. There's no safe ground to orient yourself. We, like her, become unreliable witnesses in her own life. This cinematic instability reflects the degeneration of self. There is no true her, only a product, a perception, an interpretation. She is edited, fragmented, recontextualized, just like in real life, just like we are. When she finally screams, "I'm real," at the film's climax, it feels like both a triumph and hollow. What does it real mean in a world where every version of you is being consumed, distorted, and replayed? Perfect Blue emerged from a moment of cultural fraction in Japan. The 90s were marked by the collapse of the economic bubble, rising alienation, and the digitize of life. Idol culture became a paradox, a manufactured form of innocence in an increasingly sterile world. Young people were told to be perfect, pure, and palatable. They were discarded when they aged or rebelled, and she is a casualty of that system. But her trauma feels disturbingly familiar across borders. In the West, we saw the rise of reality TV, celebrity meltdowns, and the early internet relentless objectification of everything. Britney Spears, Amanda Barnes, her journey mirrors the public disassociation that every single celebrity of that era who dared to evolve in the public eye. Today, with influencers monetizing their trauma and TikTok users performing grief and joy for algorithm engagement, Perfect Blue feels less like fiction and more like a dark documentary. Perfect Blue was dismissed by some for being too disturbing, too niche, but its fingerprints are everywhere. I mean, Requiem of Dreams has shots lifted from that film directly, and was also heavily influential in the making of The Black Swan. It laid groundwork for later masterpieces and inspired conversations about identity in virtual spaces long before it became mainstream. The questions still haunt us. Who are we when we're being watched? When we curate ourselves, replace our lived selves? Were we ever our inner selves as subject to performance? Were we ever? Where is our inner self? Perfect Blue is not about madness, it's about identity under siege. In a society that rewards performance over presence, image over authenticity, and surveillance over intimacy, her life descent isn't an outlet, it's a warning. The real horror is not when she loses herself, it's that that we may never find ourselves again. When I first watched Perfect Blue, I thought it was about pop idol losing her mind. Years later, I realised it was about us trying to be real in a world that keeps asking us to be content. "I'm real," she screams, bloodied and breathless, and we whisper back,